most important thing we've learned so far as children are concerned is never, never, never let them near your television set. Or better still, just don't install the idiotic thing at all. In almost every house we've been, we've watched them gaping up the screen. They loll and slop and lounge about and stare until their eyes pop out. Last week in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. They sit and stare and stare and sit until they're hypnotized by it, until they're absolutely drunk with all that shocking, ghastly junk. Oh yes, we know it keeps them still. They don't climb out the windowsill, they never fight or kick or punch. They leave you free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink. But did you ever stop to think, to wonder just exactly what this does to your beloved thought? It rots the sense in the head, it kills imagination dead, it clogs and clutters up the mind, it makes a child so dull and blind he can no longer understand a fantasy, a fairyland. His brain becomes as soft as cheese. His powers of thinking rust and freeze. He cannot think, he only sees. All right, you'll cry. All right, you'll say. But if we take the set away, what shall we do to entertain our darling children? Please explain. We'll answer this by asking you what used the darling ones to do? How used they keep themselves contented before this monster was invented? Have you forgotten? Don't you know? We'll say it very loud and slow. They used to read. They'd read and read and read and read and then proceed to read some more. Great Scott, gadzooks, one half their lives was reading books. The nursery shelves held books galore. Books cluttered up the nursery floor, and in the bedroom by the bed, more books were waiting to be read. Such wondrous, fine, fantastic tales of dragons, gypsies, queens, and whales, and treasure isles and distant shores where smugglers rode with muffled doors, and pirates wearing purple pants, and sailing ships and elephants, and cannibals crouching round the pot, stirring away at something hot. It smells so good, what can it be? Good gracious, it's Penelope. The younger ones had Beatrix Potter with Mr. Todd, the dirty rotter, and Squirrel Nutkin, Pigling Bland, and Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, and just how the camel got his hump, and how the monkey lost his rump, and Mr. Toad, and bless my soul, there's Mr. Rat and Mr. Mole. Oh, books, what books they used to know, those children living long ago. So please, oh please, we beg, we pray, go throw your TV set away, and in its place you can install a lovely bookshelf on the wall. Then fill the shelves with lots of books, ignoring all the dirty looks, the screams and yells, the bites and kicks, and children hitting you with sticks. Fear not, because we promise you that in about a week or two of having nothing else to do, they'll now begin to feel the need of having something to read. And once they start, oh boy, you watch the slowly growing joy that fills their hearts. They'll grow so keen, they'll wonder what they'd ever seen in that ridiculous machine, that nauseating, foul, unclean, repulsive television screen. And later, each and every kid will love you more for what you did. While not having a television set would be ideal, if one does have it, it is best to not let children go near one, whatever the circumstances may be. Children become absolutely obsessed with it, consuming what flashes on the screen until they're absolutely drunk. While it might help the parent to go about their errands uninterrupted, it does a fair bit of damage to the young minds, according to the poet. It robs them of their imagination, aptitude, and reasoning, cluttering their mental space, and ruins the ability to do something as basic as think. He proposes reading books as the alternative to the television, which is what kids would do before this technological monstrosity was invented, with their rooms filled with books. There would be stories of dragons and queens, treasurers and smugglers, pirates and cannibals. He names characters from these stories, Mr. Todd and Mrs. Tiggy, Winkle and Squirrel Nutkin. And so, in place of the horrid television set, a bookshelf must be installed, even if the kids throw ugly tantrums, because in a week's time, they'll fall in love with reading, and that will fill them with joy. They'll wonder what they found exciting in the television and be grateful to the adults for bringing about the change. The poem is written in rhyming couplets, so the rhyme scheme would be A, A, B, B, C, C. Roald Dahl was famous for hyperbole, and there is one instance of that in the poem when he says, "Last week in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor." The last poetic device that he uses, which is not commonly used in poetry unless, of course, you look at free verse these days, is typography, which is a way of arranging the text in such a manner that it attracts attention. So, by capitalizing the lines on what the television does to the mind, he emphasizes that. This poem might almost seem self-serving from Roald Dahl's end, but come to think of it and you'll realize it has only gained in importance from when it was first written, in times when the television has only been replaced by more influential entertainment options. And while I'm walking the fine line between factual and coming off as severely opinionated, I cannot help but admit that I thoroughly enjoyed Dahl's barely subtle, extremely excessive lambast into the idiot box. The benefits of reading a book, especially over time on the screen, are not unsaid or left alone. We are constantly reminded between eloquent quotations and memes and research papers. A didactic addition to the curriculum is probably the last thing we need, and yet by achieving the seemingly impossible of hyperbolic language and carefully chosen vocabulary, this poem is a telling reminder of why it's almost always better for a kid to be with her nose between pages than with her eyeballs on the floor. And yet, it would be short-sighted to pretend the entire virtual world is a wild space with nothing to offer. So perhaps, like with all reading, we must take what the poem says with a tiny grain of salt.